Chapter 12 of The Jewel of Seven Stars. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Jewel of Seven Stars by Bram Stoker. Chapter 12. The Magic Coffer. When we recovered our amazement, which seemed to last unduly long, we did not lose any time carrying the mummy through the passage and hoisting it up the pit shaft. I went first, to receive it at the top. As I looked down, I saw Mr. Trelawny lift the severed hand and put it in his breast, manifestly to save it from being injured or lost. We left the dead Arabs where they lay. With our ropes we lowered our precious burden to the ground, and then took it to the entrance of the valley where our escort was to wait. To our astonishment we found them on the move. When we remonstrated with the Sheik, he answered that he had fulfilled his contract to the letter; he had waited the 3 days as arranged. I thought that he was lying to cover up his base intention of deserting us, and I found when we compared notes that Trelawny had the same suspicion. It was not till we arrived at Cairo that we found he was correct. It was the 3rd of November, 1884, when we entered the Mummy Pit for the second time. We had reason to remember the date. We had lost 3 whole days of our reckoning, out of our lives, whilst we had stood wondering in that chamber of the dead. Was it strange, then, that we had a superstitious feeling with regard to the dead Queen Tera and all belonging to her? Is it any wonder that it rests with us now, with a bewildering sense of some power outside ourselves or our comprehension? Will it be any wonder if it go down to the grave with us at the appointed time? If, indeed, there be any graves for us who have robbed the dead. He was silent for quite a minute before he went on. We got to Cairo all right, and from there to Alexandria, where we were to take ship by the Messagerie service to Marseilles, and go thence by express to London. But the best laid schemes o' mice and men, and men gang oft agley. At Alexandria, Trelawny found waiting a cable stating that Mrs. Trelawny had died in giving birth to a daughter. Her stricken husband hurried off at once by the Orient Express, and I had to bring the treasure alone to the desolate house. I got to London all safe; there seemed to be some special good fortune to our journey. When I got to this house the funeral had long been over. The child had been put out to nurse, and Mr. Trelawny had so far recovered from the shock of his loss that he had set himself to take up again the broken threads of his life and his work. That he had had a shock, and a bad one, was apparent. The sudden grey in his black hair was proof enough in itself; but, in addition, the strong cast of his features had become set and stern. Since he received that cable in the shipping office at Alexandria, I have never seen a happy smile on his face. Work is the best thing in such a case, and to his work he devoted himself heart and soul. The strange tragedy of his loss and gain, for the child was born after the mother's death, took place during the time that we stood in that trance in the Mummy Pit of Queen Tera. It seemed to have become in some way associated with his Egyptian studies, and more especially with the mysteries connected with the Queen. He told me very little about his daughter, but that 2 forces struggled in his mind regarding her was apparent. I could see that he loved, almost idolized her; yet he could never forget that her birth had cost her mother's life. Also there was something whose existence seemed to wring his father's heart, though he would never tell me what it was. Again, he once said in a moment of relaxation of his purpose of silence: "She is unlike her mother, but in both feature and colour she has a marvellous resemblance to the pictures of Queen Tera." He said that he had sent her away to people who could care for her as he could not, and that till she became a woman she should have all the simple pleasures that a young girl might have, and that were best for her. I would often have talked with him about her, but he would never say much. Once he said to me, "There are reasons why I should not speak more than is necessary. Some day you will know, and understand." I respected his reticence, and beyond asking after her on my return after a journey, I have never spoken of her again. I had never seen her till I did so in your presence. Well, when the treasures which we had taken from the tomb had been brought here, Mr. Trelawny arranged their disposition himself. The mummy, all except the severed hand, he placed in the great ironstone sarcophagus in the hall. This was wrought for the Theban high priest Uni, and is, as you may have remarked, all inscribed with wonderful invocations to the old gods of Egypt. The rest of the things from the tomb he disposed about his own room, as you have seen. Amongst them he placed, for special reasons of his own, the mummy hand. I think he regards this as the most sacred of his possessions, with perhaps one exception. That is the carven ruby which he calls the Jewel of 7 Stars, which he keeps in that great safe which is locked and guarded by various devices, as you know. I dare say you find this tedious, but I have had to explain it, so that you should understand all up to the present. It was a long time after my journey with the mummy of Queen Tera when Mr. Trelawny reopened the subject with me. He had been several times to Egypt, sometimes with me and sometimes alone, and I had been several trips on my own account or for him. But in all that time, nearly 16 years, he never mentioned the subject, unless when some pressing occasion suggested, if it did not necessitate, a reference. One morning, early, he sent for me in a hurry. I was then studying in the British Museum, and had rooms in Hart Street. When I came, he was all on fire with excitement. I had not seen him in such a glow since before the news of his wife's death. He took me at once into his room. The window blinds were down and the shutters closed. Not a ray of daylight came in. The ordinary lights in the room were not lit, but there were a lot of powerful electric lamps, 50 candle power at least, arranged on one side of the room. The little bloodstone table on which the heptagonal coffer stands was drawn to the center of the room. The coffer looked exquisite in the glare of light which shone on it. It actually seemed to glow as if lit in some way from within. "What do you think of it?" he asked. "It is like a jewel," I answered. "You may well call it the sorcerer's magic coffer, if it often looks like that. It almost seems to be alive." "Do you know why it seems so?" "From the glare of the light, I suppose?" "Light, of course," he answered, "but it is rather the disposition of light." As he spoke he turned up the ordinary lights of the room and switched off the special ones. The effect on the stone box was surprising. In a second it lost all its glowing effect. It was still a very beautiful stone, as always, but it was stone and no more. "Do you notice anything about the arrangement of the lamps?" he asked. "No." "They were in the shape of the stars in the Plough, as the stars are in the ruby." The statement came to me with a certain sense of conviction. I do not know why, except that there had been so many mysterious associations with the mummy and all belonging to it that any new one seemed enlightening. I listened as Trelawny went on to explain: "For 16 years I have never ceased to think of that adventure, or to try to find a clue to the mysteries which came before us, but never until last night did I seem to find a solution. I think I must have dreamed of it, for I woke all on